Good day, morning, evening, fans. Today I get to sit down with Goran Stolevski, the award-winning Macedonian-born and Australian-raised writer, director, and editor, who came to prominence with short films, including Would You Look at Her, which was the winner of the Best International Short at Sundance in 2018. Collectively, his shorts have played over 200 festivals worldwide. He also directed 3 episodes of the 4th season of the International-Emmy-winning series Nowhere Boys. Goran's feature debut, You Won't Be Alone, is steeped in Macedonian folklore with a genre twist. It premiered in competition for the Grand Jury Prize at the 2022 Sundance Film Festival, receiving rave reviews from critics around. Today, we're going to talk about his latest film, Of an Age, which comes out this weekend. In the summer of 1999, an unexpected and intense 24-hour romance blossoms between an 18-year-old Serbian ballroom dancer and his best friend's older brother. A decade later, the pair meet for a bittersweet reunion. Of an Age is such a stunning film. It is made with such love and care. The performances are absolutely extraordinary, and the story is beautiful. It's so special. It's raw, it's vulnerable, and honestly, those words don't even do it justice. If I look at my notes, I have these words scribbled all over the place on the top of on the script. I have tender, kind, honest, heartwarming. Honestly, I should pull up the IMDb and do a 2-hour episode talking through each individual cast and crew, line by line, sharing my thoughts on how incredible each of those people were. Don't even get me started on cinematography. Matt, I see you. Extraordinary work. And I can do an entire separate episode on sound design, which is usually not something I highlight when I'm making notes while watching something, but it is extraordinary. This film's a masterpiece. Warning. We obviously needed about 3 or 4 more hours to finish this conversation, so maybe we'll find that in the future. Because 1, we only had 30 minutes to chat, and 2, I spent about half of that just fanning out because I love this movie. First and foremost, there's not enough time for this interview. I can say that after watching your movie, I was like, I've got 30 minutes to sit down with this man, and I don't even know how to extrapolate all the things I want to pick out of your brain about this. So first and foremost, congratulations. This is one of the most powerful and beautiful films I've seen in the last 5 years. It's extraordinary.
Okay, I needed to hear this today. Thank you so much, man. That's quite something to be hearing.
I mean, I'm mad at you partially because it's incredible what you've accomplished.
I love it when people are mad at me because I'm apparently good.
Yeah, I want to be angry. I want to be angry with you because how good this is. It's just because when you see it, the way you told the story was so. It was like I was in the car. I was with them. I was along with the journey with them. There wasn't a moment that every moment I hung on to, and there's not necessarily movies like that anymore. So. We're going to dive into all of that. But as we transition to that, I need to know, what is your favorite 90s movie?
Favorite 90s movie? Oh, God. I've been thinking a lot about LA Confidential recently, and I'm not sure even what set it off, just purely because it felt like such a canonical film at the period, and I never hear anyone talk about it. And like, especially now as I'm kind of spending more time, writing stories. When I watched it, I was just a kid. I was 12, 13, and then 14 and 15. I watched it again and again because I love film noir especially, but I'm not sure I appreciated how hard it is to pull that off and to craft like that complex a story with that much character layering, but it's also like kind of pulpy and exciting at the same time and satisfying. So anyway, I don't know why people don't talk about that film anymore because it's just like one of the greatest ever made. But probably favorite of all time would probably be Three Colors Red.
Oh,
out of the 90s anyway.
Great choice. I'm a big, much like I've done a moment I watched this movie. I spent the last 48 hours just learning everything about you. But I'm a big Linklater fan, and Dazed and Confused is one of my favorite movies. And same sort of thing. I went back and watched that, 5 years ago, and I didn't realize watching it when I was in high school, like how incredibly complex that movie is, and especially the budget they made it for, and how many characters, and how it was like you're just pulled along. Anyway, it was extraordinary. What's your favorite 90s song? It doesn't have to be your favorite, but what is one of your favorite 90s songs?
I don't know. I'm probably gonna. Well, I am very uncool, but like, it's probably obvious from to anyone who watches my film, Tori Amos definitely is the 90s to me.
Yeah.
And the song I go back to of hers is a Pretty Good Year from one of her early albums, which isn't particularly famous, but I feel like I can listen to it at every age from 18 through to what I am now, which is 37, and it means something different, and it still kind of takes me, emotionally to a higher place. I don't know how to describe it. So that's the one.
I love it. Um, were you inspired by music videos of the 90s?
Um, no, I didn't really kind of engage with that side of things. Like in the late 90s and early 2000s, especially, is when my film film nerddom flowered or exploded or kind of, became like the entire world for me. And I kind of was mainly lost in work from other eras. I migrated to Australia in '97 when I was 12, and I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be in my day-to-day life. I've since realized how common it is for everyone who hits puberty to not want to be in the place that is so boring to them, every day. But I decided to blame Australia, and I decided to go, oh, why did this happen to me? Because I was an unwilling migrant. Um, and like the way to get through day-to-day life was to, like, what I would turn to the arts with movies and music especially, is to be taken to faraway places and faraway times. I was, busy watching Catherine Hepburn movies and Ingmar Bergman movies, and that's where life happened. Or, the closest you'd get to me was Isabelle Huppert, and like Isabelle Huppert was on the other side of the world living a very different life at a different age.
Hmm.
So yeah, even with like music videos, I didn't really engage that much, or like what was in the charts, because music videos was what was happening in the present day, and I was like, I can't do that. I can't handle that.
Yeah, I love your perspective of time as a person. You can see it in your films, but it was you. And I love what you said about the journey of the characters and essentially your journey about time and place and how you reflect how this movie is essentially a reflection of your youth. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's kind of this one especially is like a very detailed emotional autobiography of who I was. Even in the moment, in '99 I was actually 14, not 17, but the lead character of Nicola is pretty much my personality at that age, at 14. And even when I came up with the first idea, I was reading a short story that was like a random boy went to a random party in high school for the first time, and like I don't even know why, but suddenly I just had a very intense flashback to the one party I ever went to in high school. And it wasn't that it was a significant event or interesting in any way, but like it kind of suddenly I was flooded with this feeling of what it felt like on the inside to be me at that age, and what I thought life would be and what I thought love would be like. And I was kind of very absent from my life at the time. Like I was saying, to me, high school was like just the waiting room before you get to, when real life begins at university and onwards. So to suddenly have a very vivid feeling of that in the context of who I became later and who I am now, I was just really drawn to that, and just like what, time, obviously, and the passing of time does to you, in terms of how you feel about life and like and love, especially when we think love and sex and sexuality are. I thought that's what I want to kind of play with. And initially, I thought it was just going to be like, my idea was just to do the section that is now the 1999 version. But then I didn't feel like that was quite enough. I think there is an inherent like sense to it of like me looking back at a time, and I'm not exactly the person who's telling the story is not exactly the same person who is on screen, obviously. But I still needed to kind of go a little bit further, because I wanted it to be a little bit more detailed. I had a lot of complicated feelings about what the passing of time does to you and how that you then look back on yourself.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with time, and I loved how you used it. I love the leap forward, and then how you reflected upon that. It was perfect. When you came to Australia, obviously, as you said, you're an unwilling migrant. Did you ever feel like it was home? At any point in your life, have you felt like Australia, any part of it, is home to you?
Um, there was a brief period, and it actually coincided with around the time I realized I was queer and sort of very comfortable and militant about it very quickly. But around like, yeah, 17, 18, 19, when for the first time when I went back to Macedonia, because I used to go quite regularly and a lot of my family still is there, I suddenly felt like that wasn't home at all. anymore. And I think it was partly related to the queer thing, but there was also a few other things. And especially like just being very keenly aware of misogyny as well. Not in a as a distant issue, but just like in a way that kind of, affected me primarily, and realizing that it was the female aspects of me that were also, things I'm still supposed to suppress and so on and so forth. I became very alienated from Macedonia, but so it made me a little more comfortable with Australia, and also I was finally hitting that cusp where university was about to start. So I was like the doors were sliding open of the waiting room, and I could see it, and I was like, okay, so now life is going to begin, and now I'm going to experience what everything Australia has to offer. So I think there was a hopefulness then that made me feel like, oh, okay, I am in the right place. Very briefly. But no, beyond that, not really. I definitely feel like I belong more in the West now, culturally speaking, than during the East. I still see. I get someone bit my head off once about seeing Eastern Europe as the East, but for lack of a better term.
Right.
But no, I grew up in a place that was very crowded. It was a tiny industrial town, but like I was in the middle of it, in a tiny flat with 8 people living in 2 bedrooms between them, and then like you go out in the street and there's people everywhere. Whereas in Australia, wherever I went, you can walk down the street for 2 hours and there's no really people. There's just like cars and joggers, but that's not really people in the book. There's no people going about their day-to-day life, much less people of different generations. There's no like grandparents taking the grandkid to school, which to me is what gives a sense of life to a place. I always felt Australia was very kind of insulating emotionally. I haven't gotten rid of that feeling, but I also don't think it's Australia's fault. I think it's entirely about my own makeup, and maybe I just cannot be satisfied with anything ever.
I get that. When you made this movie and you saw it, you're editing it, right? And you finished your first director's cut. What is it that you hoped when people saw this? Like, what did you want them to feel when they finished seeing it? What was your main goal?
I think it was genuinely like that sense of like I felt he was so under my skin, and vice versa, and Nicola and Adam as well by the end, and especially looking at the story from his perspective. Like I was so in the middle, with them, with these characters and these actors. We're very close off screen now as well. And so when you get to the end, to me there is a kind of emotional gut punch I don't really know how to phrase or describe. And the only way the film lives on after me is if that gut punch can be transferred to a viewer. So with the first cut, I was just looking for someone who, like I love that like the first person who watched it forgot that it was just a cut. It wasn't a finished film or anything. They forgot to take notes. Like the first time I watched it, I forgot to take notes. And that had never happened to me before, or to my producer Christina who watched it. So I think the way she became very emotional about it, and she's had a different life. There's parallels inevitably between most. If you find 2 random people, I will find parallels in their lives for you, but still we have very different backgrounds. But that was it, that emotional sense, and a lot of it. I think both my features like come down to a feeling of is it really worth it? Like everything you have to go through to find that connection. Like, is it really worth it when there's a lot that is destructive along the way? So I think that's the moment where that film ends. So is it really worth it? For me, there's a specific answer, but I didn't want to impose that answer.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And did anyone ever try to give you advice that you should impose that answer?
I think, like, to be honest, this has been the weirdest experience in that it was so easy to put together, like, in financing and we finished shooting 2 days early. Even like in the middle of the shoot, we were running so far ahead of schedule. We had 2 days off so the boys could grow facial hair, and aged into 2010.
Yeah. And at the beginning of this, you asked me why I'm mad at you. This is why I'm mad at you, because you can tell. You can tell when you watch it. You can tell.
It's ridiculous. Like, nothing will ever be easy again or was before. But like, just consider, like, for context, for 20 years before I made my first feature, I was making short films for 20. I made 25.
That's amazing.
This is 2 of 13 features I'd written. I'd been unemployed for so long. I can't even tell you how much rejection and how many people I wasn't good enough for along the way. But I think there was a sense that even though You Won't Be Alone wasn't finished yet, that I'd kind of with that film, if whether or not you liked it, there was a sense that I delivered on the vision I said I would, and apparently that's not very common, which is hilarious.
No.
So I think people felt like whatever I'm saying, I will achieve. That they believed that it would, which was like 180 degrees from the rest of my life leading up to that point. And there was some suggestion of like, what would you imagine happens to them, if you stayed with them for another 5 or 10 minutes in that room, and I kind of, I mean, I have a very concrete idea, but I was like, I think that doesn't work if I reveal that.
Yeah.
I think we need to live in that feeling in the end and reflect on that rather than kind of make things too neat and summarized.
Amen. I agree. I completely agree. To your note about taking notes while you're watching it, usually I'm having to, watch these and make notes for the interview and yada, yada, yada. Had my laptop out, my pen and paper, and I'm not joking, I just closed the laptop after like 3 minutes, and then I put my pen and paper, and I had to watch it back to back twice because one, I wanted to, but then I had to take notes the second time around. So that's the first time on these interviews I've ever had to do that again, just because I didn't take notes the first time. And like then the notes were crazy. I've got notes. I mean, it was like circle, and I'm like, okay, now we're going to dive into this thing. And there's like so many notes. And one of my biggest takeaways, and this has never happened to me before, as I was watching this at the end, I was like, there's so many incredible qualities about this, but one of the things that has never stood out to me before in a movie was the sound design. And I was like, this movie, like so much of it resonated with me because of the way I'd love to see your script. The cross talking that happens at the parties and as characters are transitioning, and the sounds, all of it is done so beautiful. The bass from a different room that just kind of barely like resonating, and you can hear it. And then you've got like this, I'm guessing, an original score with these like beautiful like composed pieces, elements that connect all of it, from the sound mixing, editing, sound supervisor. It's amazing. How did you achieve this?
Yeah, I work with very good people. I'm very finicky because, like, when I'm editing a scene, I'm not just. Well, firstly, I never do a rough version. It needs to, like, always feel the best I could possibly do in that particular moment, and that includes the sound. So I go into like literally cutting the breaths, individual breaths at a particular moment and cutting them out because I feel like obviously, like you can use sound so much to control how connected someone is to the person on screen. And so I kind of go in for those details from the beginning and then with the music as well. And that's how I kind of get stuck into certain patterns where like the fine cut, the picture locked version has to kind of be very close to the final version because it's so glued to the particular piece. And in this case, there's 35 of them. Actually, none of them is actually composed for the film.
Wow,
they're all
really?
licensed. Even the piece that feels like score, it's actually a piece I came across. It was someone had used that as part of a promo for this film. There was a company we contacted for a trailer, and it was just like so beautiful, and it kind of cut into anyway. Like even that had to be licensed.
Yeah.
Wow, and I was using it
feels everything feels so perfect.
Thank you. That's great. No, but it's all like because what I do, my approach in filmmaking is always like work with what's there, work with what's in front of you, not the idea you had. And inevitably, a lot of it is things I envisioned, and especially all the songs the characters are hearing on screen, like that had to be locked in well in advance. We had to talk to Tori Amos's people first off because a key scene rests on very detailed conversation about which song of hers we're talking about. But yeah, afterwards, like in the edit, like I just go, this is what I have in front of me, and these images need to blend with this. I'm not gonna try looking for, I don't know, anyway, insert famous artist here, because I think like what's in front of me and what's attainable, I need to work with. And I come from a background where like my short films were mainly DIY, and I was the entire crew, and there was no budget. And there was things I imagined the story could be, but like what is there in front of you is what you have to work with. And I think in the edit as well, like, and also looking for details you can bring out that you didn't expect. And then sometimes, putting a piece of music you never thought of before against the images brings out a certain element of feeling. And even if the music isn't completely right, it just takes you in a different direction to find something else that's similar. I in the scene he walks into the party, I thought we would just be listening to the death metal that's in the room, but I realized that it just became like a really mundane scene, and you just lost the thread. And it was only when I repeated that same piece that keeps going on that I realized this is the only way you can keep connected to him. But if you're not hearing the party music underneath, it doesn't quite work, because then it just becomes a trailer video clip. So it's all very fine tuned, and even at editing stage, that needs to be kind of locked in before we get into the sound mix or sound design part. But then I do work with Emma Bordignon, the sound designer, on both of these ones. On the third one, she's actually working on the third one right now in Melbourne. And like her attention to detail and ideas, layering a scene, is just, it's really hard to find someone who sets high standards for themselves in that way in general, much less can adapt to someone as idiosyncratic as me in the way you work. So, and she's she's quite young, but she's a veteran. She's extremely experienced. So I feel very kind of honored that she works with me, at all. Like, she's quite picky, and there's an element there also, like, even when I'm doing all this crazy shit, like, there is quality control at the end of someone with, a strong idea and strong understanding of what I want to achieve. Going, I'm not sure if that's the idea or this is good, and this is what else we can do.
Yeah, and it works because it's the party scene. The scene in the third act, no spoilers, but like all those, there's a very complex scenes where there's so much sound that could happen in those scenes, and you tweak one or the other, it kind of falls apart, and it's so perfect, and it keeps you engaged with the characters, and the way you shot it, pulling really tight into them, it's incredible. How many days did you have to shoot this? You came in 2 days under. How many did you have total scheduled?
We had 20 days to shoot it, but we shot it in 18. But 2 of those 18 were days off, so it was 16.
Oh my god!
Also, we finished early most of the time. This was never happening. I don't know how it happened. It happened again. Like, actually, no, the film I've just finished, we also wrapped a day early.
Oh
but like,
you're a dream, man. That's incredible.
Like, my background is like being the crew and having not enough anything much, and suddenly I'm like, I've got a crew and equipment and actors who can act, like, oh, I have to shoot fast now.
Yeah, I've been on sets, I've worked, I've seen a lot, and I've seen some big projects go sideways, and the one thing that I've seen is that filmmakers who have a vision, and you clearly have a very clear point of view and a vision, and going into your projects, you communicate that to the actors. I saw like a note that on one of like the actors you reached out to, you sent them like your director's creative statement and then in it also like a sound design, like creative story about what you're going to do with the sound and the way you're going to edit. Like, and I love that you're sharing that with the actors that you're looking to cast. Like, no one does that. And so you've seen this movie and you already know how you're going to shoot it, and you know where the camera's going to be and where the light's going to be while you're writing it, I'm sure. And I was like, do your scripts have a lot of like your editing notes and your production notes in them as you're writing it, since you're so 360?
Absolutely not. No. I keep all of that entirely out. To me, like, I write a script purely for the feeling it will give the eventual actor when they read it for the first time. Because a lot of direction for me is literally how the words are shaped in the big print, in the dialogue, like, verb I use at what point and what punctuation, just is the way that an actor experiences a character shapes so much of the performance they can never undo again.
Yeah.
And I never want them to be thinking about how they're going to look or any of those things. I speak to them about it a little bit later, just so they can feel kind of safe within a certain story world, and so that, like, because there's some things that we do that are unconventional that I think if you don't have an understanding of how I'm going to eventually cut it, you'd be like, oh, that's going to be really stupid, or it's going to sound really stupid. But like, it's more just to reassure them so they have an idea that, like, there's other things going on that will, compensate for something that might not feel exactly right in the moment. But the first time they're reading it, I need them to just be lost in the story world and lost in the character. But also in terms of what you're saying, like, I do have a very concrete vision of the film before we shoot it. Like, I shot list obsessively, and then every night before I shoot the next day, I throw away the first version and do a new draft. But on the morning of the day, I throw it away and I never look at it again, because it's more about absorbing the feeling of it. And then again, I go back to what's in front of me and going, how much is exactly what I pictured, and then what else is missing. And if the thing is missing is usually not something you can bring from thin air. So what's in front of me here that can make up for it? And I actually usually look for new things on set and new moments that will surprise me, Rather, if I've just shot what I envisioned, like, okay, well, that was the backup version, so the scene might not be amazing. And yeah.
Well,
There was something else I was gonna add, but it was interesting.
well, in your notes, or in the production notes, I noticed that there's a lot of terms around, Matthew had mentioned that you, by the way, like, it's so funny. Like, I had Justin Chonin on for the Blue Bayou like 2 years ago. And then I've been trying to get Matthew on this because like, I love his cinematography. And so he had in there a note, he said, we're with working with you, you feel the scene, you feel the film as you're going through it. And I love that note that you have this intuition through performance and through production that guides you through it. And so I think it makes sense that you can knock out a movie in 16 days. That's crazy. How long did it take you to
I'm
write
also
this?
editing while I'm shooting. That was the other thing. Like, I'm actually editing it in my head while I'm shooting, so I know kind of if there's something, if there's a little bit missing to just glue a new moment together with the rest, we can pick that up afterwards. But also, I'm not going to shoot a wide shot for backup.
Yeah.
And I think that ends up, when an actor is amazing on close up in a way that I know holds my attention, I know I'm not going to shoot into a wide shot. And I think it keeps the crew much more connected to the film as well when they know they're not just shooting things for backup.
Yeah. No, that can be daunting. Like just getting coverage all day long. Yeah. That's a lot. How long did it take you to write the script?
Again, this is not representative, but 8 days. Yeah. And it's the first draft we shot. No, but it's my 13th screenplay. I've written 12 others beforehand and like 20, 300 probably short films before that.
Still, there's great screenwriters who've taken years to knock out a draft after successfully knocking a lot of scripts. That's incredible. So 8 days, that's amazing.
But I mean, there were 8 very intense days. Like the film I want to shoot next, it took me like a year or a year and a half.
Wow.
Across. So it's not always one or the other for me.
I get it. I was curious. It's a very powerful film that's it's very soft and it's tender and it's very powerful. I mean, like to your point, the gut punch, like there's these moments throughout it that are so visceral. As you're the director, you've written this in your mind, you've seen it in your head a bunch of times, but did you show up to set one day and be like, whoa, this is a lot. This is emotionally hard for me to see this. Was there any day that it was a little too much or no?
Well, completely. I mean, like, because also I try to put my headspace in what the actors are going through. Anyway, like, if they're crying, I'm usually crying in the background. And, It's not, there's a scene actually the first time, how do we even phrase this scene? Like right after they go to the dinner, the goodbye dinner, the daytime one. And the first time they're in the car saying goodbye in the daytime. That in its writing, we all always saw that scene as comedy, essentially, primarily. And then, but I didn't really emphasize that in talking to Elias, who plays Cole, the main character. And he kind of, and we also shot that scene kind of unplanned. We finished one day like so early that we just had to add scenes to kill time. So that wasn't something we had prepared for. We're kind of improvising it, the construction of it a little bit on the spot. So I didn't go too detailed in terms of the direction there. And then the first time he played, and I was in the back seat and like I started crying inevitably. And suddenly this scene took on a weight that I did not know was there. And it came out of his feelings, connecting to this character in this particular moment, because he plays it like real life. He's not thinking about how this might look, because I don't want him to. And suddenly, and the way he plays feeling, I know he's experiencing it in that moment. He's not mimicking it. So in the backseat, I'm just watching this and sort of like falling apart on the inside. And suddenly this scene that I thought was just a gentle transitional one took on all this weight because it's a boy realizing he's queer in real time, which is extremely painful. I remember at the very, very first moment. And it just shifted my whole understanding of the film. If something that intense is happening at that point, that means the scenes after that can't have, the lightness has to be very specific, and it's sort of the weight of that scene then informed it like in leading up to it. And we shot it like on the third day of filming, so it was still pretty early, so I could reshape what was coming up to it, thankfully in the coming days. But like it didn't involve changing dialogue or anything. It was just purely tone and feeling. And it also meant that like my favorite scene in the script, which was the nighttime drive that happens later, was instead of out of the 7 pages, we did shoot all of it in the end, but like only the first page survived into the final edit because all the feeling that was going to contribute had already accumulated. And it came from, this boy feeling things as intensely and truly as you would in that particular situation that even I missed out on, that all of us that, we spent so much time with that script missed out on how much weight there was in that moment. And I think to me, when you get that, it's such a gift that you do everything you can to fit, because if it stands out by itself, it just comes out as tacky, or misjudged. So yeah, anyway.
Man, that's incredible. It's such a powerful scene, and you've done such a great, incredible job this entire movie. I know you've got to run, but I have one short question for you. It's a very short one. It's one we ask at the end of every podcast. What is your comfort food? You're having a bad day, and you're like, I need to eat this. What is that?
Can I say Wong Kar-wai? Like, does that work?
Yes.
Emotional comfort food, or literal? Yeah. Wong Kar-wai.
I love it. I love it. Goran, it's a pleasure to talk with you. I had told you, the moment I'm like, we need 2 hours for this conversation. we barely scratched.
Oh my God, like the way what this is doing to my sense of self-worth. We can do 5 hours. It's all good. Thank you very much, sir. You.
Thank you. This is such a beautiful movie. It was. I can't wait for the world to see it next week. And thank you for making the time to have a conversation with us. It's a true honor. Thank you.
Oh, it was a complete pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dwayne.
And that's a wrap, kids. Thank you for checking out our latest episode, and be sure to see Of an Age in theaters ASAP. It comes out this weekend. And follow Focus Features on Instagram for all the latest on Of an Age. You can also check out our Instagram at The Smith Society Pod for our latest news. And don't forget, we have some live events planned for the summer, so stay tuned. Finally, the best way you can support the Smith Society Podcast is to rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow your dreams, no matter where they take you.